The first poem in our textbook, Flamingo, for class 12th, is My Mother at 66, written by the famous poet Kamaladas. In the introduction to the poem, I would like to tell you that this poem talks about a mother and a daughter on their way to the airport from their ancestral home in Cochin in Kerala. On the way to the airport in the car, the daughter keeps looking at her old mother and the kind of thoughts that are going on in her mind, she shares with us. This is the situation in the poem. Now let's see what is happening in the poem. The daughter says, while I was going to the airport with my mother, I was sitting in the car. Next to me, my mother was sitting. I kept looking at her and I found that she was dozing, open mouth, and her face was so pale, like ash. So looking at this, the daughter realizes with pain that her mother almost looked like a corpse, like a dead body, because she is open mouthed and her face is pale. And the realization of this fact that her mother is aging makes her feel very, very bad. So she understands that her mother not only looks old, but she has become mentally old. So you will find a line in the poem, she was as old as she looked. So if she is 66, yes, she looks 66 now. And this is a painful realization for the daughter. Because if you are physically old, it is quite natural. Growing mentally old is optional. If you are able to keep the fire in you alive, if you can keep the passion in you alive, if you can still remain curious to the wonders of life, I think you will never grow old, you will only age gracefully. And that is the point where the daughter realizes that I am going away from my mother. And if she's growing mentally old, I'm going to carry the guilt in me for leaving her. But maybe the daughter has a valid reason to go away from her mother. Maybe she's working abroad or some other parts of the same country, wherever it is. So this realization that my mother has become physically and mentally old disturbs her. So whenever we are disturbed by some thought, we try to snap out of it. Maybe you would listen to music, or you would go for a walk, or someone may do workout, etc. But she's in the car, they are on the way to the airport. She has very limited options. So what she does is, she looks out of the window to divert her mind from this disturbing, painful thought to something very pleasing and cheerful. So when she looks out, she finds two things. One is trees running backwards because the car is moving forward. A simple science. And the second sight she finds is children, large number of children running out of their homes happily. So for a while she could divert her mind to something other than her mother's thoughts. Now, why does the poet talk about these two sights specifically? Both the sights seen by the daughter are a contrast to what is happening in the car. The trees are young, they are sprinting. That's the word used by the poet. Like a sprinter who needs a lot of energy, vigor. Whereas the mother is pale, she is weak, she is almost like a dead body, the daughter says. And the children are running happily from their house. Now the daughter is leaving her mother not with so much of happiness. So both the sides outside the car are just opposite to the emotions and the situation inside the car. So there is a contrast. So this is where the first part of the poem ends. I would like to tell all of you that when you learn this poem and you prepare questions and points for the examination, for your convenience of learning, you can categorize this poem into two parts. Now you may ask why. See, the way we learn something makes a drastic difference in the kind of output that we would give in the examination. So this is one of the methods of learning that I would recommend. So the first part ends here, that mother and daughter are on the way to the airport. She looks at her mother, she is disturbed, she looks out, she finds two things. Now let's see what can be the next part. Of course, what happened at the airport. So the two parts, part one is in the car to the airport. Part two is at the airport. Now let's come to part two. At the airport, after reaching the airport, the airport procedure, the person who has come to see you off can't get into the airport. So the mother has to wait outside and wave to her daughter. So daughter enters the security check, and after finishing it, she gives a last look at her mother. She turns and looks at her mother for one more time. And she finds that her mother is so detached and passive and weak and pale. She says she looks like the dull moon in winter, the late winter's moon. And this sight of her mother triggers again painful feelings and thoughts in her. She says that suddenly I could feel a pain in me. And this is not something new. I have felt it from my childhood onwards. So she uses the word, an old familiar ache. Why is it familiar? Because she has experienced it earlier too. My childhood's fear. What can be a child's fear in childhood? Pain of separation from mother. You must have seen some of the beautiful advertisements where a child goes out to the market with its mother, and while purchasing something, somewhere the child loses the grip of his mother, and all of a sudden the whole world changes for him. He's no more interested in toys and anything that is for playing or for fun. He feels that his world has come to an end. You all must have experienced when you were in class 1, when you came to school for the first time. Your parents would have come to admit you at the school, and I know that quite many of you would have created a scene in the school. Some of you would have run back home with your parents, because you could never imagine that you are going away from your mother. So this pain of separation, this anxiety that I may be separated from my loved ones, from my parents, from my dear ones, is a pain or an anxiety that remains throughout life. It is very psychological. It is said that this thing starts from the very first day when the umbilical cord is cut and the child is separated from the mother. From that day onwards, all of us carry this insecurity, this anxiety that am I taken away from my dear ones? I remember watching a very interesting advertisement, a commercial ad of Royal Enfield, where you will find the umbilical cord of the child is never cut, and wherever he goes, his mother follows him. You can watch it. It's very interesting. So the daughter looks at her mother and she gets the same old fear once again within. She feels that maybe when I come back next time, my mother won't be there. And I'm helpless. I have to leave her now. So deep within, she has been feeling guilt, helplessness, pain of separation, fear, anxiety. But see the last two lines of the poem. The poet uses this conjunction, but. She says, but all I said was, see you soon, Amma. And all I did was smile, smile, and smile. If you look at the poem, you will find it does not end with a full stop. It does not end at all. Because this kind of fear, this kind of longing to be with loved ones always remains. She feels pain within, but she doesn't express it to her mother. She knows that my mother is becoming weak psychologically. She's feeling lonely. She needs inner strength and consolation and support. So the daughter very intelligently does not tell her mother that I am feeling very bad, mom, etc. She says, I will come back soon, don't worry. You will be fine. This is just for a few days. This is only a temporary phase of separation. I'll be back soon. So she gives consolation, strength to her mother. And she keeps smiling. And that smile is not an abrupt one. She keeps on smiling till she goes out of sight into the airport. So the poet, this is the second part. If you look at the poem, the poet very beautifully, intelligently, brilliantly follows the graph of emotions of the characters in the structure of the poem. I think that's what makes this poem outstanding. It's very difficult to follow the emotion of a character and construct something which follows it in structure. So if you look at the poem, it is one sentence. There is no full stop in this poem. Because that thought which is there in the mind of the daughter doesn't end. It continues. So it's so beautifully crafted. So this is the content of the poem you must pay attention to. And before concluding, let me tell you that this can be categorized into two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 in the car to the airport, whatever happened. Part 2 at the airport, the feelings that she experienced and what decision she took. That's what the poem says. And the value that you should take from this poem. Why do we study this poem? Some of you may ask such questions. Why are we studying this poem? Because we live in a world where emotional quotient is coming down. We don't have the same intimacy that old generation had with their dear ones. So that kind of a crisis, that kind of a situation, when it exists around us, it's very important that children should be taught how important it is to value someone who is old, to respect somebody's emotions, to give strength and support to old people, to be with parents, to care for them. Aging is a natural process. This time that the mother is going through will come for her daughter also. It will come for everyone. So your love and your good words, a smile, a pat on the shoulder, all these things can make a big difference to somebody's life. So read the poem, understand the emotion, and I would say, why don't you take up something like interviewing your mother? Ask your mom certain questions at home. Or write about an experience when you were separated from your mother for a few days. Maybe you went off to some other place for study, or you were living in hostel, or you were in your relative's house and parents were far off. What did you feel that time? So it's very important you communicate your feelings with your parents. So let that be the message from this poem for you. So prepare well, enjoy the beauty of creative writing. After reading the poem, you need not worry whether it is Kamaladas' own mother or is it Kamaladas the daughter. That question is secondary. Whoever it is, it can be anybody. A poet can feel somebody else's pain also and make it as his own or her own. That is the magic of creative writing. So she brings all those elements into it. Nowhere you find there is an unwanted diversion in the poem. So some of you may be aspiring to be poets and writers. Keep in mind one thing, your emotional quotient matters a lot. Your imagination matters a lot. The craft that you bring to your emotions when you express it, that makes a big difference. All the best. Read the poem, feel it, and I'm very sure once you feel the mood of a lesson, it won't be a burden at all to write about it in the examination. All the best.